If you've worked with SAS, what is it? What is it? Why? No, if you've worked with SAS, then you kind of know what SAS is, right? It starts off being this way to do things a little bit easier with CSS. And then it gradually takes the form of becoming a little bit more complex. And then it takes the form of, oh my God, what the hell did I do to my project, right? And we want to learn more about the problems with SAS, and we have someone here to tell us about that. Now, years ago, I was traveling through France, and I stopped at a gas station, and I tried as an American in France to do my part and make an effort to speak French a little bit. So I don't know what I said, but all they did was laugh at me, which it scarred me for life. You can tell that I'm traumatized by this, right? So I went to Hugo, and I almost wanted to change rooms because I'd have to pronounce his last name. And so I went up to him, I said, how do I pronounce your last name? He's like, don't. Don't bother.
Don't try.
We're not even going to do that. Don't try. So he saved me. So thank you very much, Hugo.
Is this working? All right. Yeah, so the reason why you didn't quite introduce the talk is because I didn't know what I would talk about until 2 weeks ago or something. I wanted to bring a lot of things in there, and then I recall that I would speak at 4:30, and everybody wants a drink now, wants to have the party, a beer, and a burger. So I thought, okay, let's do it in a more friendly way. So the talk is entitled 3 Years of Purging SAS. But before explaining why, let me maybe introduce myself a bit. So Hugo, let's stay away from the French last name. Nobody can pronounce it. It's fine. Hugo is fine. You can pronounce it how you want. Hugo, Hugo. Everything is fine with me. Somebody yesterday called me the SAS guy. I mean, it's fine as well. I'm 23. I work in Berlin at SAS Units as a front-end developer. And if some of you know me already, you know that I like SAS. So it's quite an euphemism at this point. And for the past 3 years, I've been writing SAS basically on a daily basis. And I've contributed to a lot of open source projects, way over 30. I checked recently and submitted over 300 pull requests on GitHub about SAS. And so the general feeling I have about what we are, the current situation, is that we can do much better. A lot of designers and developers still use SAS in a kind of a dummy way, trying stuff, and then leaving it here. It works. Let's not touch it. It's fine like this. So I wanted to help as much as I could because I started 3 years ago and I was terrible at it. I did a lot of shit with SAS and a lot of things that were completely wrong. And at that time, I wish someone came and said, "Hey, just stop it right now. Just do something else." But nobody did, so I learned a lot in the process, and now I can actually come here and teach you what I can. Just before I move on, let me come back to this and just thank Eden Spiekerman for letting me come here and literally give me 2 days to assist this conference and being able to talk with you. So yeah, it's by the way, we hire. So if you wanna come in Berlin. As I said, I wanted to put a lot of stuff in there. I had to cut some things down and set up on 5 different chapters I'd like to talk about. And so we're going on an adventure. The first one, SAS Units, is if you have to learn one thing from this talk, please be it that one. Because it's a battle I've been fighting for the last year, and trust me, it's not won yet. So if you want to go to sleep after this chapter, please do, but focus on this one. It would be great. So SAS Units, I realized that nobody knows how SAS Units actually work. It's kind of black magic. everybody tries things, bad things, and to this point, it's a complete mess. So let me clear this up for you. It works exactly as in real life. I mean, there is no magic behind it at all. It is exactly the same as in real life. So if you have some basic arithmetics, so how to handle math, like basic math operations and the way units work, then you are good to go in SAS and you know how to use proper units. So like when you want to add a unit, let's do some basic math first. So if you have 1 cat and you multiply it by 3, you end up with 3 cats. This is very simple. But if you have the number 3 and you append the cat word to it, you don't get 3 cats. You get a string that happens to be 3 cats, like this. Now, if you have a variable, SAS variable, and you pull some number from somewhere in your app, like here it's a static one, 42, and you add a unit like this by adding just like plus pixel, or if you interpolate the units because you've read it in a blog post, well, when you try to multiply it, you just did your unit appending, and then you try to multiply a variable, and SAS is being very gentle and gives you a very friendly error, which is that 42 pixel is not a number, and then you wanna quit. You don't know what's going on, and you try a lot of things, and like, how is it possible that 42 pixel is not a number? So coming back to the original points, if you want to add a unit to a number, it's as simple as multiplying it by one member of the unit. So if you want 42 pixels from 42, then just multiply 42 per 1 pixel, and then you're done. Another way of doing it is just adding 0 pixel. It's a little less obvious, so I'd advise using the multiply per 1 pixel instead, but it works as well. And now if you try to multiply your number per 2 or whatever, you end up with the correct result, which is nice. And it actually makes much more sense than trying to interpolate units at the end of numbers and doing crazy stuff, black magic that nobody can understand. It's the same when you want to remove a unit from a number. So if you have 3 cats and you divide it by 1 cat, you end up with the number 3. So if you try to use string slice to remove the units of a number in SAS, it's bad, because it makes no sense for starters, because a number is not a string, so, well, you can't use string slice, and it's not an obvious way of doing so. Along the same lines, if you've seen it somewhere, maybe, like, how many of you know approximately what it does? All right, cool, that's better. So this is a dirty hack to remove a unit from a number. So it's like terrible, and the worst part is it's in all the famous frameworks. Like, I think Bootstrap has it, Foundation has it, and a lot of other, like Bourbon has it, Compass has it, I believe, and it works. It does the job, but it's still a hack, and it's not obvious what you're trying to do, and there is a good reason why there is still not a function to remove a unit from a number in the core SAS, because if you apply basic arithmetics, then you don't need a function to do it. So if you divide your variable by 1 pixel, you end up with 84, and you have your number. So again, it's like really much in real life. You don't have to. I mean, it's not a specific feature from the SAS syntax. It just works as it should work, because core designers from SAS are clever. Chris Epstein, if you read this. So Last thing on units, square units. In real life, if you have a room, you want to give the surface of the room, you give meters per meters, and you end up with squared meters. It works for any units. And the crazy thing, it works in SAS as well. Like if you multiply pixels by pixel, you end up with squared pixels. I mean, it really works. And so if you try this, SAS will tell you that this friendly message, not 84 pixel times pixel isn't a valid CSS value. What it should do instead is saying that 84 squared pixel is a valid value, but not in CSS. So, well, as clever as the language, error messages are a bit. But yeah, so squared pixels, they exist. SAS actually managed to understand that you're trying to compute squared pixels, and then it tells you in its own very particular way that it doesn't make sense and that you actually don't need it in CSS to build a website, which is nice. So yeah, well, don't try to multiply pixels with pixels. Instead, when you want to multiply it, just do it with a unitless number on either hand, so either on the right or on the left, and it just plain works. Or you can also multiply two different unitless number, and then you do what we did earlier. You multiply it by 1 pixel, and you end up with 84 pixels. So that was a lot. So the thing to remember is that units in SAS are not just a string that lives at the end of a number. It is not how it works. It is part of a number. And any manipulation with units, like adding a unit, removing a unit, converting, should be thought as a mathematical operation. It shouldn't be thought as a string operation, like adding a new string at the end, slicing the string at the end. It's really just math. So try to stick to basic math to handle your units operations. All right. If some of you want to go to sleep, it's now, because the first chapter is over. So let me just have a drink. And SAS list. So, the very first project I've built in SAS, I'd say 2 years ago now, is called SAS lists. It's how many of you have ever heard of SAS lists? Right. It's a library that provides a lot of SAS functions to manipulate lists, like slicing lists into smaller chunks, removing the given value in a list at a specific index, removing a specific value in a list, and so on. So I started playing with lists very early, and in a very bad way also. And the conclusion of this is that lists already exist in CSS. I mean, SAS didn't invent anything new here. If SAS invented, brought maps in CSS, because CSS doesn't have maps, for instance, CSS has lists already. If you take the font family property, it's just a list of value. It's the same for padding. It's also a list of value. And actually, most CSS properties are or can be lists in some way. So it's either separated with commas or spaces, and font family is separated with comma. Padding is separated with spaces, for instance. And so you can apply a direct mapping of lists from SAS lists to CSS. So when you want to store a font family in a variable, don't make a full string out of it, because it's hard to read, and it's a mess with quotes, and it actually doesn't make sense, because the font family property is not a full string. It is a list of values. So use a SAS list when you want to store it. And here, you have the first one is Helvetica, then you have Arial, then you have sans serif. And if you want to make your system evolve, and at some point you need to access the fallback, of your font stack, sans serif here. You don't have to do some crazy string manipulation like slicing on the last comma and taking everything that is after it, which would be terrible. You just access with the basic env function from Sass, you just access the last one. So if this works, it's not future-proof, sorry. And if you want to make your system evolve at some point, it might involve some either heavy refactoring or a lot of hacks, which I would advise against. So if you want to add, if you store your font in a variable and you want to add a new one at the end or a fallback, don't append it as a string. It's not an elegant way to do it. Instead, use the provided Sass API link append function. And again, if you want to like access the last item or the first item, and it's very easy to do so. You don't have to manipulate string and slice them and do crazy stuff. So use them. Don't use string when you don't have to use string. Like when you can do a direct mapping of a Sass list to a CSS list, then use a list because it's the right way to do so. On topic, just you might know that the append function has a third argument, which is either comma or space, and you can specify like the separator of the list. So if you want to create a list with spaces instead of commas, you can just add space as a third argument. Right. This is a weird title. At first I wanted to entitle this chapter, Null, and then I thought somebody in the audience would think like the slide is buggy, something like some data is not correctly pulled from somewhere. So no, I want to talk about the null value, which literally means empty. So this is a very particular value from Sass. And I've noticed, like by browsing frameworks and libraries, that some people don't quite get when to use it, why using it, and like if we can actually use false or something else. So please don't use nil. I don't know if some of you do Ruby in the audience, but this is a value from Ruby. Sass is not Ruby. I know it comes from Ruby at the very beginning, but it's not Ruby anymore. So nil doesn't exist. So don't use it. Don't use undefined. Sass is not JavaScript. So it's not a good way of defining an empty value. Don't use uppercase letters, because then it's not a null. It is not the null value anymore. It is a string. So it's not what you want. And try to make the distinction between null and false. Null means empty. False is the opposite of true. Null is not the opposite of true. So false means either wrong or disabled or something like this. Null just means empty. So even if both false and null are falsy value in Sass, it's still better to make the distinction. And when you want to create an empty variable, then use null. And the good thing about the null value that actually not many people know about is that when you use it directly in CSS as the value of a property, it doesn't output anything. Like it discards the property altogether. So, well, that one was hard. So let me just illustrate it. So if you have a variable foo, but it is null, and then you use this variable as the value of a CSS property here, color. If you compile it with Sass, no matter Ruby Sass or lib Sass, doesn't make any difference, you end up with nothing. Like the color property has been discarded altogether, which is very cool when you build mixins, especially like complex one with a lot of if-else conditional styling. Instead of having a lot of conditions, you could just make your default value null and then print it like this. And if it's still null when you call the mixin, then the property is discarded, which like makes the code much easier to read. On topic, please don't build heavy mixins. It's not a good idea. Don't over-engineer everything. So yeah, so the null value, try to think of it. Don't use false when you don't have to use false. Null has this very particular behavior when used in CSS. It doesn't print anything, so try to stick to this. All right, I'm speaking very fast. I'm way ahead of my timing. Let's move on. Let me slow down a bit. So for the first few parts, I mentioned good and bad practices. On this one, I am going to be a bit more opinionated. Sorry, but this is like the main problem we have with SAS on GitHub, on open source projects. It's that the code quality is terrible. Like, I don't know, I am very obsessive with code quality. I mean, I need everything to be just like perfect and very well commented, documented, like every semicolon and everything. Some people are not like this, and the problem I see with this is that when you provide some code on GitHub, when you provide a library or framework or whatever, you are basically coding for someone else, and I feel like you have to make sure that your code is like at least very good, if not perfect. Because if someone wants to update it, maintain it, or contribute to your project, and it comes up and you see like a complete mess of chaos, it's gonna be like, okay, table flip, I'm out. So yeah, so try to like pay attention to the quality of your code, and here are just a few tips for SAS. So the first one is calculation. We have a lot of grid systems built in SAS. We have way too much of them, way too many of them, but most of them deal with calculations. Like they handle the grid stuff, the columns, the gutters, and everything that comes in, so like float and stuff. And they do a lot of calculation, and sometimes it looks like this. And this is a very easy one. But still, when you come up to this in the middle of a 25-line SAS function, it's getting a bit hard to like figure out what's going on. So try to be obvious with the computation, like put spaces between operators, between numbers. Don't neglect, don't forget the leading zeros on your numbers. I know it's one obsolete zero to type, but it can make the difference when you have to read a lot of them. Use parentheses, even if they are not quite useful. Sometimes it's just better for readability to have some parentheses. And try to make the life easier for you. If you come back to your code in 6 months from now, what would you prefer, this or this? Along the same line, try, if you have a very complex calculation, don't hesitate to break it on several lines. Like create several variables, it's fine. It doesn't like slow things, and it helps a lot like understanding what's going on. And if it's very complex, which is a very bad sign, but still, if it's very complex, comment it. Comment your calculation. Like why are you doing this? Why are you dividing by 3? Why are you adding like half a units and so on? So try to give your math some love. Variables, function, and mixins, and the way we should name them. CSS is a very hyphenated language, except for a few exceptions where it's terrible mistakes, like the no wrap value from the whitespace property, which should have been no dash wrap. It's no wrap in a single word. All right. Like translate x, it should have been translate dash x. It's not. It's translate x in a single word. It's just mistakes. Let's move on. CSS is still highly hyphenated. Every property is using hyphen, like font family, background size, and so on. So try to stick to them when you name your variables, your function, your mixin. Try to like respect this naming convention that has been made in CSS. So don't name them like this. and prefer hyphen version. It's really about consistency at this point. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. It's fine. Some people just prefer camel case. Some people prefer hyphens. Some people prefer underscores. It's perfect fine. But again, consistency is the key. And if you want people to be able to contribute easily to your projects, then let's try to keep a global consistency with CSS. On topic, you might not know that hyphens and underscores in SAS are considered equals. Like you can use in a variable name, you can declare it with hyphens, and then you can use it with underscores. It works exactly the same. So you can either use map-get or map_get. Both works in the exact same way. The reason behind this choice is that, well, I don't know if it's a good reason, but still, it's that hyphen or underscore is a stylistic preference, and that it shouldn't impact the way we write or call the code. So it might be confusing, so I don't feel like it's necessarily a good way. But so my point would be to, again, even if it works with underscores, try to stick to hyphens when you have consistency across the CSS and SAS and the whole project. But still know that it just works fine with underscores as well. I'm gonna be a jerk on this one. I hate nesting. Like, who likes nesting here? Selector nesting. You like it? All right. All right. All right. With you. Good. Well, I guess. No. So the thing is, selector nesting is a very good feature on the paper. I mean, it has a very good meaning, and the problem is not the feature in itself, but the developer. So it's not fucking Russian dolls. So just like keep it cool, because it doesn't help as much as we think. And did you ever see something like this? Yeah. All right. Do you like it still? No. Okay. This is the pyramid of doom. This is bad, people. This is terrible. And like for the record, the 10 days ago, Bootstrap 4 has been released. Did any of you like look at the source code? Okay. So, well, is there a Bootstrap contributor in the room before I do some trash talk? No. Well, they might say it online, so let's... Bootstrap is a very good framework. I mean, we like it, we don't like it. All right, it's still a very good front-end framework. It solves a lot of problems. It introduces a few problems as well, but still, it's a masterpiece of front-end development. It's a very good one, really. But I've been so they recently moved away from less, the preprocessor, and moved to SAS. So I was excited. I was like, cool. I can like read the source and I can enjoy it. No, no. I don't know why they do this. Like if it's on purpose, but the source is very not clean to read. There's a lot of nesting involved, like very much. Sometimes you have a mixin, and then you have a selector and another selector in there, and then a pseudo class, and then an element. It's very hard to read, and I do CSS pretty well, so I can only imagine a CSS beginner coming to Bootstrap and being like, cool, I'm gonna read the source so I can understand CSS and SAS more. And God, it's bad in so many levels, and so nesting is bad. Come on, it doesn't help. I mean, it doesn't make the code easier to read. Au contraire, it doesn't help with speed. I mean, we all have powerful IDEs, and they autocomplete almost everything. So the endless arguments like, yeah, but I don't have to repeat the same class over again. No, it's bad arguments for nesting. And the last one, which is probably the worst, is but it scopes styles. Then my styles are scoped. No, they are not. Styles are not scoped in any way. You're just building selectors in an implicit and very hard to read way. So, my point. What was it? Nesting is bad. So, like this is just easy to read. I mean, the feature itself in nesting is good if you stick to either working alone, which is fine in most projects, or if you stick to pseudo classes and pseudo elements. In which case it's very fine. Like when you have an element and then you just have the hover states nested in there. It's very good. It's very elegant. And the last one, pro nesting, is the media query. Well, nesting media queries within selectors makes sense, at least to me. So this is the wall of consistency. Nice, huh? Yeah, so I told you I would be a jerk with this one, so like point made. Coming to the next point, SAS Guidelines. I'm not going to self-promote it too long. Just how many of you have read it? Cool. And okay, cool. SAS Guideline is an opinionated style guide to write sane and maintainable SAS. I think it's it. And it's all right. I mean, it's not a masterpiece. It's just a good start for people who don't have a style guide yet to write SAS. The point is not to enforce anything on anyone. It is very opinionated on many things, including nesting. So the point is not to enforce anything. It's more like having a style guide is very important, especially if you work in a team. We might think at first like, yeah, but everybody knows how to write CSS. Yes. Everybody knows how to write SAS. That's a weird assumption. And after like 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year, like nobody is able to update anything in the style sheet because it's spaghetti code and it's inconsistent. You have a lot of variables that are hyphenated, some are camel cased. You have sometimes a mixin, sometimes a function, and it's getting very chaotic. So the point of SAS Guidelines is just to avoid the trouble of writing some guidelines if you're not very opinionated about stuff. Just like read it and then extend it. Take everything you want from it, add your own stuff. But the point is like really, if you start a big project, if you start a project as a team, make sure you have some good guidelines for writing code. For CSS, there is CSS Guidelines from Harry Roberts, which is pretty much a masterpiece at this point. And for SAS, there is this one, and for JavaScript, you will find some, and just like have some. It's like Beetle. And the last thing from this talk is about the SAS spelling. So it's a backronym. It means that it's a word we found, and then we applied some meaning on the letters. It contrary to the acronym where we have some words and we like take only the first one and we have a new word. So it's a backronym. So like Hampton Catlin found the word SAS. It was like, oh, okay, it will be SAS. And then over the month or years, we thought it would be fun to call it syntactically or some style sheets. But the point is, don't yell it, and like just keep it simple with the first letter as a capital, and then you have the S. So, all right, let's sum up a bit, and then we can enjoy the after party. So, SAS units, they work exactly the same as in real life. So it's all about mathematic operations. It's not about slicing stuff, adding stuff as strings. Unit is not a string living at the right hand of a number. It is part of a number, and anything related to a unit should be thought as a mathematical operation. No problem. No problem. Lists in SAS lists are not just for frameworks and libraries. They can be used directly in CSS. A lot of CSS value are using lists in some way, either with spaces or commas as separators. So when you build CSS value from several items, try to use the SAS lists. It's more elegant, and it allows you to grow and it makes your system evolve without having to do a lot of refactoring. The null value means empty. It doesn't mean wrong. It doesn't mean false. It doesn't mean the opposite of true. It just means that a value is empty or undefined. So try to use null when you can, and not false when it makes sense. And remember that when used in the in CSS, it's like the property will be discarded. When used as a CSS value, the property is discarded. So this is very helpful. Coming back to this, like I cannot stress this enough. Nesting is fine. Heavy nesting is harmful. So try to keep it cool. And so code guidelines are vital. Be sure to have some. And last but not least, it is SAS. No, it's SAS. So that's it. That's pretty much it for me. Thank you first. And if you cannot ask me a question or don't want to ask me a question here, you can still ever catch me here or at the after party, or you can hit me on Twitter. I try to be responsive with questions and code reviews, so be sure to do so. Thanks.
I was kind of hoping you'd be a little bit more opinionated.
Yeah, no, I try not to be too much.
Do we have any questions? Yes.
You obviously don't like nesting, but you said light nesting is all right. How much nesting is too much nesting? Like 10 is bad, you know, we're not to that, but like 3, 4?
Yeah, a few years ago, the guys at the SAS way came up with the Inception Rule, which is in reference to the movie Inception, where you are not supposed to go deeper than 3 levels.
3.
It's a very popular article. It's called the Inception Rule, so be sure to read it if you haven't. And I still think it's way too much. Like 3 levels is way too much. I think 1 is fine, because 1 allows you to do like pseudo classes and pseudo elements nesting, and media queries nesting. If you start having 2, you are making the code harder to read, especially if you have a lot of CSS declaration, because sometimes you have your code like this in your IDE, and the uppermost selector is way above, and you can't see it. So this is one of the reasons why nesting is getting bad in some way for readability when you have a lot of code. When you have just 1 property every time, I think it's fine, even like 2 or 3 levels, because you still see in all cases you still see the Racine root selector.
Yes. Okay, so for the stream, the question was, is nesting, or your hatred of nesting, is it a readability issue? Is it only a readability issue?
Mostly, and the thing is, I cannot find any good reason to do it. Like I've been trying hard, and at the end of the day, it doesn't bring anything on the table. I mean, it doesn't help much. It doesn't help with speed. It doesn't help with scoping. It's just a syntactic sugar that has gone way too far. Although, recently on a project, we didn't use nesting, so like that's the first point. And we are building a model, and we want to scope it with a unique selector, unique ID. And so what we did is we had a build process at the end, which wrap the entire style sheets with a selector. And then we rely on nesting to, create all the selectors with the unique ID every time. It works super fine. It's like a dummy way of scoping styles to your unique ID. It works. But if we used nesting, if we had used nesting all the way, then the reference selector ampersand might have changed on the second compilation because it's not the same selector anymore. And then you can have like selectors that do not make sense anymore and do not even match, and you can have big trouble. So it's an edge case because it was a build process and it was a very specific task to do so. But you can see that if you like over nests, the ampersand reference is sometimes hard to it's hard to figure out what it is behind it. So yeah, it's mostly readability, and in some cases it can actually hurt.
Anyone else? I have one.
All right.
Who's right?
I am.
You're right.
No, I'm not.
You're right. Because you have CSS guidelines you talked about, or SAS guidelines. When I read that, or was it CSS guidelines?
CSS guidelines.
Yeah.
High robots.
So I read that, and I was like, for some of it, I'm like, yeah, I can understand that. It's pretty, yeah, I get the logic behind it. And other things, I'm like,
Why?
no.
Yeah.
So who's right? Because some other, person number 2 says something completely different.
Yeah.
So all these people with their opinions, and they all think they're right. Who's actually right?
I can tell I am not. I mean, I have some strong opinions on some things, and past experience and the current work at Eden Spiegelman, where we do a lot of SAS, tells me that I haven't been so wrong so far. But I mean, if it works for some people, like if some people are fine with nesting, then it's okay, fine. Regarding SAS guidelines and CSS guidelines, mostly guidelines in a very general, broadly speaking, the point is not to enforce anything on anyone. It's more to give a basis to work on, because most people don't have time to write guidelines. I mean, when you set up projects, like nobody's gonna give you one day to write the full guidelines to write code. So you have to start somewhere, and you have to have some. So the point is more like to give it to people so they can actually like rely on something. And what we did on SassDoc is to write our JavaScript, we relied on some specific guidelines. I don't know who wrote them, but some things were not for us. Like we didn't feel comfortable writing this or that. And so what we did is we just wrote a very simple document saying we rely on those guidelines except for, and then we listed just the things that we do our way. This is just like extending a document, and it seems like a very sane way of proceeding, because then it still prevents you from writing a 10,000 word document about everything in the language, and you can still say, okay, like this is not for us, let's do it this way, and then you have everything written in a single one.
So it's more about choosing something
Exactly.
and being consistent.
Yeah, exactly. Consistency
knocking
is,
over the cutout.
Yeah. Consistency is all that matters at the end. So if it's with nesting and everybody's fine with it, then be it with nesting.
Okay. Thank you, Hugo.
Thanks.